session is about back office, and if you are a family office, how you can run things efficiently. So with that, well, let's introduce our speaker here. I won't do your full background, Erin, but you're the founder of Deviate Consulting. You've got a long history in family offices and back office operations. I know you worked in tax accounting a little bit and private equity fund management, and then kind of branched out to do your own thing with the consulting firm. But I think let's start here and have you give your background. And just for a little bit of housekeeping, this is recorded. So we'll share the recording for people who have registered after. And we'll do Q&A at the end. So I've got some questions I'm going to ask Erin, but you guys can always submit to Q&A here in, I think there's a Q&A section in Zoom. So go ahead and submit questions if you guys have them, and we'll cover those at the end, and we'll leave a fair amount of time for that. So with that, Erin, please talk us through your background and how you got into the space that you're in now.
Gosh, so I always classify myself as an accountant because I just do. That's how I think. So I started, after college doing fund accounting, processing capital calls and distributions. And then kind of got into this family office world when I started working for Archway Technology Partners. They were SCI for a while. Now they're back to being the Archway Group. I'm in Indianapolis, and they are also here in Indianapolis. So when I started, I also did not know what a family office was, but I was with them for 5 years doing family office software implementations. And they have if for those that don't know, they have a system. It's a family office ERP, essentially, general ledger, performance reporting, AP, AR, all the things wrapped into one. So I I really loved the work. I loved the clientele. I loved the, accounting, finance, but consulting aspect of it. But it just became very apparent that the family offices needed help. So, help with selecting the appropriate software, setting expectations, help with back office, help with the implementation. And so I left in 2015. So we're on our 11th year, which is just wild. And so we do focus on those three things. So selection, implementation, back office work. For single and multifamily offices, we do dabble in the RIA space as well. Just kind of depends what the clients need. But yeah, that's a quick overview of the background. But we've got about 15 to 20 team members today, and they all, focus on mostly software implementation. So.
Cool. And congratulations on the over a decade of existence. Most businesses don't make it that far. So wonderful. Great work.
Thank
Um,
you.
and so the first question that I have for you, and if you want to share your slides now, we certainly can. But the first question that I want to dive into is, because you've been in this industry for a decent amount of time, how have you seen family offices develop and change in structure and investment thesis over the years?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think I'm going to share my slides right now, but we'll
Okay.
see. People request the slides, I will share them. Sometimes people like to take notes, but you know, when I first went into a family office, right? Like into the office, um, I I was very nervous, I mean, this is a long time ago. I was nervous. I'm like, how am I supposed to help these people? They know all the things and they're smart and they've got the best people. And no offense to anybody, and again, this was a long time ago. I was a little bit shocked uh, at how unstructured it was, and then I'm like, huh, okay, well, maybe I'm not such a bozo. Maybe I can help here. But it was a little shocking, just seeing, that it was kind of loosey goosey because it's a weird space, right? It's a family office. It's real, but it's not in some aspects. It's a business, but it's not. And so, it's and it depends. Some of the family offices have been, they're on G2, G3, G4. So some of those were more established, but the newer family offices were kind of winging it, to be honest. So I think over the past 15 years, the the family offices have seen a need to become more institutionalized, especially if they are going to, take on outside investors. Some of them, end up turning into, partially an RIA. But I think that they've realized, whether it's just, learning from their mistakes, people maybe dropping the ball in the office, maybe if some people have experienced fraud, things just along the way. And I think also their peers becoming more institutionalized. They're becoming more strategic. They're trying to make it, a more well-oiled machine. with people that they trust, which is also, a difficult aspect for family offices. And, there were and are still a lot of families who have had the person that's working with them that's been there for 30 years. And so it depends on the staff too. But I think things are becoming more complex. I think, because of tax reasons, there are specific entity structures that the lawyers are suggesting and the tax experts are suggesting. So now all of a sudden they go from 10 reporting entities to 50, and they're like,
Mm.
hey, this is a lot. This is a lot more, and so they've got to find a way to keep track of everything. There's a lot more increased reporting expectations, as the families are transitioning from, whether it's G1, G2, G3.
And just for the sake of democratizing information, G1, G2, you're talking generation, right? So you have Gen 1, that's I don't know if you call it Gen 0, but like the founding person or people, and
Yeah,
then Gen 1. Okay, thank you.
correct, correct. So, I think there's now more people, by the time you get to the third generation, there's more people involved. It's not just the founder anymore, keeping their, accounting records in a book. There's more people involved. They want to know what's going on. They want to see what's happening with their estate and their money. So, and people, from for everybody, I'm sure can identify with this, but the reporting requests are varied.
Mm.
You would think there would be a handful of reports that would cover most everything, but everybody wants something more specific. So you've got to have a better system to be able to do that and do it in an efficient manner. So, the multi-generational governance, as you said, different people from the family being involved. And at the end of the day, they need to become scalable. I'm sorry for moving around, but
Okay.
this is real life. I've got to deal with my dogs barking. So there you
Yeah,
have
we
it.
can't hear them. You're okay.
Okay. So yeah, they're trying to become more scalable. They need clarity, and they need to think for the long term. So
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And I think that covers too. My question, my next question for you was about what operational challenges that they see, but I think we covered that. So I'm going to skip to the next one and
sure.
ask. It would appear to me, and it, again, maybe just me anecdotally, that family offices are getting, and I think actually statistically this is backed up, but I think they're getting more involved in private market investments in like alternatives. And what one does that track for you? But then two, what shift? Like I don't think I understand what is driving that shift into like direct investments into companies, direct investments into funds. I see a number of firms, particularly with younger generations that are now managing like startup type investments. There's a group called Family VC. There's like a group, I think they're at 300 families now. It's a community that it's only for investing in VC, a little micro community around that. So
Yeah.
do you sense that that is correct, that family offices are spanning more into alternatives? And two, what do you think is driving that shift?
I think you're right. Family offices are getting into more alternatives. I have clients now, you know, and this ties in, with the software aspect, but they're like 80% alternatives,
Mm,
and they're just not as invested in marketables anymore. So I think that is definitely true. Um, I think there are a handful of reasons. I think number one, the returns. The returns of private investments are typically better, you know, um, and so they're getting into them for that reason. Also because they're really focused. Certain members of the family may really care about, whatever it is, technology. And so some of these funds are very, and private investments are, they're focused on the issue at hand. And so I think a lot of that resonates with the family office investors, because they want to invest in what they care about. And so I think that's part of it. I think part of it is just plain old exclusivity, right? Like
mm,
you've got to be an accredited investor and you've got to be, vetted, and not just anybody can get into those investments. So I think part of it is that, but I think the biggest driver really is the returns and the focus on very, very specific types of investments that they truly are passionate about.
okay. And do you see that more with family offices that have grown or like that have longer, I don't say longer longevity, more longevity than the shorter ones? Like, do you think that they tend to focus and then as they get more and more mature, they tend to span out?
Sometimes I think that that is true, but I think for the new generations that are coming up and taking over the family office, I think it's also because of that. I think because of the younger generation. So, yes, to your point, has that family office been around for a long time and now they're kind of, trying different things and getting into new areas of investing? Yes, but I also think it's because of the younger generations that are advocating for that. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful context. And I know we're this is we're meant to talk back office, but I just wanted to make sure that we
Yeah.
cover like, these are things that I'm genuinely curious about
Yep.
as someone
Right.
who is not interfaced. Like the only family offices I interface with are they're purely looking for software, very specific venture tracking software. So like that's the span of my knowledge. And so
Yep.
thank you for indulging my questions.
Sure.
Next question. So I want to dive into a little bit on best practices,
Okay.
really around reporting, because that is
Okay.
what we are here for, back office and reporting. So what I assume that reporting is going to be custom for the family office as far as what you do. Like you're building custom type systems for each office and helping them define what that looks like. But are there any standards that you have seen implemented or that you recommend to offices as far as like what quote unquote good reporting looks like? So things that they should be tracking, things that might be unique to their firm or unique to the investment thesis. So could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So ev everybody wants something different. There are certain things that, you've got to have, right? So, I mean, I'm an accountant, so I come from, you're going to need a formal general ledger and you're going to need, very clean financial statements, in the way that they want those presented. You're going to need um, performance reporting, and, the common return elements, of tracking, whether it's, private investments or liquid investments. Those are those are standard, right? But there are also a lot of family offices who, not only want variety in the reports of, just literally what column is where and what time period this is for and what are the colors. So they really truly want them to look a certain way. But there are other family offices who, I think it's family offices tend to go in one of two directions. Either they focus on accounting, tax, or they're more focused on the investment side. Not always, sometimes it's balanced, but and that's typically driven by, the patriarch, matriarch, or whoever is wanting to see those reports. Um, so there are the standard reports, but at the end of the day, they really want to see those exactly how they want to see those, and everybody's different. So, I think some of the commonalities are they want the reports when they want them. They want them timely. And so is that today, do you have a specific reporting cadence that you're going to follow? Probably, because and that's a consideration, when picking a technology, like how does it work and how fast can we get a report out? Because if you've got somebody that wants something, in 2 hours, then you've got to be able to deliver on that. So, I think they want it timely. They want to see it in the way that they want to see it. Also with clarity, with clear, indicators, whether that's performance. Some of them want to see cash flow. Some of them want to see cash flow projections. Some of them, want to look at, I don't know. I mean, they might want to see outstanding bills. It just
Mhm.
kind of depends where the family office's focus is. But I think, the ability to produce the reports quickly, obviously accurately. They're assessing performance. Some are assessing risk, depending on if the family office is doing their own investing. Um, they want to see a high level summary, and some families want to be able to, click into that and see what makes up this number. Well, this cash flow. Well, let's see then further what's in there. So
Mm.
some of the family members are fine, with a global view. Some of them need to drill down and see more of the details. But I think, they want consistent data, they want timeliness, they want the reports to look the same, real time or near time visibility. They want different views. So they might want, maybe they just want to report to see all of their holdings, whether that's directly or indirectly through, a partnership. Or maybe they say, you know what, today I want to see my children grouped together. I want to see the whole family grouped together.
Mm.
And so they want consolidated reporting, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest goal, of the reporting. They want to see liquidity and they want to see, just everything that's going on in the office. So I would say, to answer your question, I mean, I think it's timeliness. I think it's consolidated reporting. Obviously, standard financials are good, but also the ability to be flexible with reporting because they typically everybody wants something different and they might change their mind, so the ability to be able to produce different types of reports with things in different places is also really important.
And when you guys do consulting projects and implementation projects, how are you, like, what are the conversations and questions you ask to draw those objectives out from the office? And I ask because I think there's probably some folks on here who are trying to figure out how to structure their own reporting. Like, how do they may not be what I would call full family offices because that indicates a certain size. But even if you have sort of micro individuals who are investing with their children or they like done things that, how would you suggest they go about mapping what is most important from a reporting standpoint?
So one of the things that it sounds weird, but I feel like sometimes it gets overlooked is explicitly asking whoever the consumer of these reports is going to be, family members, most likely, obviously, then internal teams. I feel like sometimes the question is not directly asked to the family on, about what do you actually what do you want to see? Because at the end of the day, that's the most important piece. So, I mean, we start with interviewing. So if we can interview the family members, even better. We interview everybody on the internal, family office team, the C level. We talk to everybody about, what are your needs? What do you want to see? What's working? What's not working? What's on your, dream wish list that you wish you could have? So, because sometimes, people don't want to share certain things maybe with their managers and, they don't want to be vocal about what they need. So we talk to everybody on the team, including the principals, and we really drill down into what they need and then what they think they need because and we ask them to get really specific because you know if you have a system and you need a custom report, sometimes it's going to be expensive to create a custom report. And so you want to make sure that this is really what they do want and what are you going to use it for and where do you want to see things. I need a spec of this report because it's easy to say like, well, I need this report where I can see, month over month cash flows. Okay, great. But I need to know exactly what you're looking at. I need to see a prior report. I need
Mm.
to see, some people will provide reports like from their like institutional reports from their bank or broker. And they're like, I actually really like this report. I wish all the brokers would, issue a report that looks like this. So then we kind of start to get an idea of, okay, this is really what they're looking for. But I think it's about digging into the details and not just glazing over like, yeah, we can give you that because if you do that, inevitably you're going to present them something and they're going to go, well, this isn't exactly what I was imagining.
Yeah. Yeah. And what mistakes have you seen offices make when trying to set up structure for themselves? Outside of not diving deep enough on like what is actually needed, are there any other common mistakes that you see or common oversights when it comes to reporting and like back office structure? And the other question, sorry, not to make this too long, but the other question that I had while you were talking was how much, if you had to speak in generalities, how much external support does a family office require And is there a point at which too many accountants is a bad thing? Or like, is there a number or a standard departmental support that people should be kind of structuring after? So
That's
two
good.
parts, but
That's a good question. That's a good question. It's sort of like once you reach assets under management or once you reach 50 entities, okay, you need an employee for every 20 entities or something like that. That's really hard. That's really hard to gauge because some of the offices it really kind of depends on their complexity.
mm,
So I would not say there's a hard and fast rule. That would be great if there were, but some of our families have 180 entities. Well, maybe half of those entities are just like pass through, right? And they don't do much. Maybe they have a couple entities which hold like, one asset. And so it's hard to put metrics to that. So, but I think that it revolves around complexity and like a maker checker situation. So, I'm going to enter these checks. Somebody different needs to be reviewing that and releasing it, right? So it depends on whether they're doing that in house or maybe they're not doing that in house. So if they're not, you might need, less of that staffing in house. So it's an annoying consultant answer. It really depends. Um, maybe it depends. I don't know. And then as far as the reporting mistakes, I think that there's value in obviously looking at what we've done in the past. Here's what we've done in the past and thinking through, has it worked? Which of these reports do you want to replicate? Why do you want to replicate them? Sometimes the answer is, the principal, this is how they want to see it, and that's that. They want to see it this way, and fine. I get it. They don't want to change, but some of the other reports internally that the accounting team or the finance team might need, I think that's one mistake is just replicating everything that was in a spreadsheet and making a report out of it without rethinking, the structure and, what's happening today. What about in a year? What about in 5 years? So really rethinking the reporting structure, um, the data, having the data inputs and how is that getting into the system? If you've got, and this is very typical, a family office having a giant spreadsheet and it's beautiful and I respect it. It's got like 1,000 tabs and everything links together. Like it's truly amazing. But if you've got one person that knows how the spreadsheet works and maybe somebody else who kind of does, I mean, that's obviously a problem. There's a lot of risk in that. And so then, is that person keying things in by hand? Where is it coming from? And so making sure that the data is standardized, it's, coming in through some type of data feed, not being touched, manually as less frequent, as you have to. Um, and then I think, having reporting that's overly complex and that's not really helpful. You really need things to be streamlined. You need the data to be good, but you also need it to be ingestible. And so, maybe the principal wants one report, but is that helpful for the team? And
mm,
so, you know, um, just making sure that it's workable for everybody and you're really thinking through getting to the core of what everybody needs and asking questions because I think sometimes I can come in, I'm a consultant, I can ask people questions, I can say things and you know I may or may not get fired, I don't know, but sometimes people in the office are scared of losing their jobs, they don't want to rock the boat, and so that's
uh,
part of our job is to help them really dig in and ask the questions that they might be afraid to ask or they might be afraid to speak up.
mm. And do you think that part is unique to family offices? Like, do family offices have a unique, almost emotional dynamic to them relative to other types of like investment firms?
I think that's true because some of the family offices that have been around for a long time, the people that are working in the office that have been there for 25, 30 years, it is like it's basically like family, so then
Yeah.
it turns into a family dynamic. And so then you've got to think through because the family office, sometimes they want to keep the staff on because they want to they need jobs, right? They're not going to take their job away. And so sometimes the communication isn't clear because you get into those family dynamics and they might not want to speak up or you're trying to protect feelings because when you've been working with people for 25 or 30 years, sometimes you can be comfortable with those conversations, but sometimes you can't. And people are just trying to keep the peace.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me. At the conference that I mentioned before, at that session on family offices, the guy that was speaking primarily was he was like a financial advisor, investment advisor for the family office. But the way that he referred to it, he like it was multiple times in his talk about things that he was saying my family office, my family, like as if like possessive, my. And I was like, that's interesting,
Right.
because you really it like signals emotional attachment to me, emotional relationship, which is
Yep.
yeah, anyway, it stood out to me. It said, so thank you for answering.
Yeah, and I think that's important really in any setting is they do need to feel like it's theirs, and because that allows them to make an impact and care about the job. And so I think
Yeah.
you're right. Like it's it's a deeper attachment that is great, but can sometimes, cause conflict.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next question for you. So if a family office realized that it has outgrown spreadsheets, so they've got their massive spreadsheet that they love and they've used it for 10 years. And actually this spans, I would say for family offices formally, but also, a lot of the angel investors that I talk to, even the angel networks or like people that, people managing investments. Once you've outgrown your spreadsheet or you start to see signals that you have outgrown your spreadsheet, what's a good first step to take, outside of calling Erin?
Outside of calling me, um, you know, at that point, I mean, a lot of family offices are, I shouldn't say most, maybe it is most, are using QuickBooks and a spreadsheet. That's the most common combination. So, maybe they're working in QuickBooks, but then they're keeping maybe like private equity data or something in a spreadsheet, but it's just getting too messy. There's more people in the office. And so then they're like, well, we need to do something. And so then what do? Most of them, I mean, will start Googling, family office software. And so then they will, they've got somebody on the team that's sort of assigned this task of like, all right, let's figure out what we're going to do here. And they call vendors and they have a lot of conversations with vendors. They might even have demos to kind of start the process because they don't know what to do. Um, and so then they get to the point where they're like, oh, we've seen like 8 demos, but I mean, this is just a lot because they've got their day job, right? Um, if you, I mean, in my opinion, a family office needs to either hire somebody specifically for this purpose so that they truly have time to focus on the software search, finding something that's going to be a good fit for them, or hiring a consultant because it's it's a lot. It's exhausting and you've got your day job and you don't want to cut corners because it's a really big decision and something that you're probably going to stick with for quite some time. And so it's very easy to get exhausted. I mean, we all do it. I do it all the time, and maybe I'm just like, oh, I'm sick of this looking at this menu. I'm just going to order
Yeah.
whatever. And then I get it and then I don't like it. But that's a small risk,
Small investment. Yeah.
these are small things for me. Um, but for them, I mean, that is a huge risk in just being like, all right, well, we saw these 5 demos is exhausting. Like, let's just go with this. But you really need somebody, whether it's internally or externally, to be able, I mean, it's a big project. And so I would
Mhm.
say the first step is enlisting help because you're going to waste time if you go through and you see 8 demos and um, you talk to these vendors and then they're probably going to bug you, right? Because they're going to follow up on their sale and then it becomes stressful. So I would say step one, enlist help.
Mm. I like that. I'm always on the vendor side. I'm the
Yeah.
one that is pestering like that. And I've literally been in the middle of that process. I think a lot of times that they end up assigning, it's like it's a lower level task, like that they view as a lower level task. So they give it to an analyst or someone, or like, it's just
Yes.
not an intern function. They're hired for the office, but
Yes.
like that type of, uh, level. And
Yes.
then I'm every other week, I'm pinging this, uh, you know, the analyst that doesn't have answers and also has
Right.
done 15 demos and they don't really know what they're really looking for. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Right. That's exactly right. Because it is like it's hard, it's hard and it takes a lot of work and a lot of thought. Something else that I tell my client, I'm very tough love with my clients. So, one thing that because I've been on the vendor side, if a client in family offices, they typically take a while to make a decision. Fine, that's fine. I mean, there have been, deals that the salesperson at Archway, when I worked there, was talking to the client and then like it closed like 2 years ago or something, like it can be a process because they're just not ready to commit and it's a lot of money. And so the sales cycle for family office is really long. And so that's one. But I tell my clients, like, listen, the vendors, if you if you're not committed to making a decision and you're not committed to starting the search, then don't start it because the vendors are going to get sick of you. I mean, it's just true. The vendors are going to go because the vendors talk and they're like, oh, well, we've been working with XYZ family office. They come in and then they disappear, and then they come in and they disappear. So the vendors just start to they just stop. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right? Like they stop taking you seriously because they're like, these guys are never going to make a selection. And so you don't really think about that, but you have to look at it from the vendor side. Like it's can be exhausting for them too. So if you're not ready to start the process, then just don't start it until you are truly ready to focus because you'll end up getting a bad rap with the vendors and they might not put their best foot forward with you because they just kind of get sick of it.
Mm. Yeah, I understand that. And from the vendor side, I appreciate
Yeah. Yeah.
the tough love. Yeah, because I think for us it spans like family offices, VC funds, angel groups, but these are all very long sales cycles for us. And so yeah, it's 2 years, 2.5 years. Like I'll get emails that are forwarded from before I was with the company, like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That didn't come to me because that person's no longer here, but the forwarding is still set up because
Yep.
they left, and like you have to keep the email active in case
Right.
someone years down the line comes back to say,
True.
"Hey, I actually remember this demo," and yeah.
That does happen. I mean,
Yep.
I had somebody engage us for help with the software selection. I mean, I probably met them 8 years ago, and then
Mm,
I'm like, wow, this is amazing that this actually ended up coming to fruition. But that's exactly right. It's a long sales cycle, and I also have to coach the vendors, especially if it's a new salesperson on the vendor side. I once had a situation where the salesperson at the vendor, they had not worked in family office before and they didn't understand the long sales cycle and they didn't understand that like sometimes you're just not going to get a response and then 3 months later they'll pop back in, right?
yeah.
And so they started to get really mad and they started to be pretty rude to the client, and I just had to tell them like, we can't work with you on this anymore. I'm not going to be having you talk to my clients this way. And either you need to understand how the sales cycle works and be okay with it and adapt to it in this market, or you need to do something else because this is just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. So I've got two more questions here and then we'll open to Q&A, and I want to make sure that we leave enough time for that. Um, so what tends to be the biggest hurdle with tech implementation? So if you've decided on a software that you like, I'm a family office and I like this one, I just think I like this one. What is the biggest hurdle to actually implementing that in practice?
This is my favorite question because I love
Mhm.
the implementation side of it. It has to do with people.
Mm,
And so most of the time, people on the team don't have enough time to do an implementation on top of their job, right? So it's because a lot of times the C level doesn't understand what it's going to take for this implementation. And then they're like, why is this taking so long? I really try to involve the C level at the beginning. They need to know what their team's going to be dealing with. And they need to consider whether they need a consultant or to hire somebody internally because you don't want people on your team getting burnt out and quitting because of this implementation. So it's challenges with staffing, it's challenges with um, people's motivation and change management and having to learn a new system. I mean, that is the biggest hurdle. And I once had a client, and there was an individual on the team where I'm thinking this person's probably gonna retire like pretty soon. So, I had a side conversation with her, and I'm like, hey, do you want to do this implementation? And she's like, no, I don't want to do this implementation. And I'm like, well, duh, because if I was about to retire, I would not want to do this implementation either. Does she know where the bodies are buried? And does she still need like to help with some things? But she doesn't want to do this implementation. And I don't blame her. So living in reality about like, how is this really going to go? And if she doesn't want to do it, well, you don't want her holding you back. And so I tell my clients, if the implementation fails, it's going to be because of you. It's because
Mm,
you don't have enough people and you don't have enough time to focus on it. And I just hammer this home. I say it every meeting when we're prepping, and I tell them, and hopefully it sticks. But that is definitely the biggest hurdle. There's also not understanding, who's the lead on the project, who's going to be gathering data, who's going to be communicating with the consultant or the vendor, like understanding the process and who's doing what. Their job roles in this implementation might be different than their normal day-to-day job roles. So
mm,
who's doing what? Um, I think buy-in from C level, because I will have conversations with the C level and say, listen, this is going to be a big implementation. You need to if you're used to getting a report on X day of every single month, we might need to change that because it's going to be really hard for your team um, to keep doing that when they're focused on this implementation, and then you're going to be irritated when the implementation fails. So, let's really look at what's going on here. Um, and like I said, the change management and bringing in, again, either an employee or somebody on the outside that's dealt with change management. And a lot of that has to do with people are afraid of that they might lose their job because of
mm,
this technology coming in, and that's typically not the case. um, but these are real people, and they have real lives, and they have real stress, and so you need to really get to the crux of the people, I think, to make it successful.
mm. Okay. Okay, that's helpful, I think. And then final question, and if anyone has other questions, you can start to drop those in the Q&A. For family offices that are growing quickly and looking to standardize the back office, do you have any recommendations for structure on the back end? Not necessarily the tech implementation, but kind of across the board. Any things that you think are important for structure so that they can scale and so there's not so many bottlenecks as they start to grow?
Yep. I think one of the things that needs to be considered first is, are we doing this fully in-house, or are we gonna outsource some of this? You know, what do we want our people focused on? Are we comfortable with letting, our privacy level and letting an outsource firm, whether, maybe they're fine with it, but maybe they don't want somebody overseas. Maybe they want somebody in the United States or Canada or whatever it is. Um, Really thinking through, and if they're against outsourcing, I think outsourcing is becoming more popular, especially as the younger generations come in. Um, Really thinking through, what do we want our people focused on? And some people, they want less people in the office, more maybe C-level focused on, making decisions and that type of thing. But there are other family offices that want to give people jobs, and they want people, in the office working on these things. So I think that is a major consideration, because that's going to drive a lot, you know, a lot regarding how the family office is is going to work. So are you going to hire people? Are you going to outsource? Are you going to do a combination? Um, Having clarity on your roles and who's doing what. So you've got, finance, you've got accounting, most likely. And so, really delineating and understanding who's doing what, who's focused on client service, because sometimes, at least in my experience with some of my in my past life, my old roles, accounting and finance are they like end up butting heads. And so really figuring out how to get those teams to work together and defining roles. Um, I think, having specific cadences of meetings, reporting, you know, maybe if you're subject to an audit, like the checkpoints, and really having a script of what you're going to do, having your operations, having processes and procedures. Nobody likes doing processes and procedures. It's a pain,
Mm.
but you can get, and I like working in software, obviously. So like when I'm presented with a new software platform, it's like, hey, this could help us with our process and procedures, or maybe it's AI. It's more exciting than me just sitting there writing process and procedures. So there's multiple ways to go about that now. And I think, cross training, thinking through, succession planning, which a lot of you would think that um, large family offices are going to have that nailed down. They don't.
No?
They don't want to talk about it. You know,
Okay, okay. It's depressing, I suppose. I
yeah,
think.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
they don't. I've seen so many family offices scramble when a patriarch or matriarch that I mean, it's not, they're not even, they're in their 90s. So it's not a shock that maybe they pass away, but they've not even thought about that yet. So there's a lot to think about, for sure. But I think at the end of the day, it's really structure, clarity, and having somebody who's a leader that is going to make sure that, you know, that transparency is top of mind, and that they're really thinking through the decisions and creating a structure that everybody can operate in and succeed in.
Mm. So it sounds sort of to me like treat it like a business, like you're, building a business structure there when
Right.
it feels uncomfortable or a little bit weird because it's a family, but also
Right.
business structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're right. And that's kind of how we started this conversation of, making it institutional. So it does feel weird.
Mm.
But you do have to get out of that family dynamic and yes, into like
Yeah.
being a real business. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to, it's open to Q&A now. So we've got, I don't know, 25 people here. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we'll go through those. So we'll give a minute or two.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me today. This has been really fun.
Yeah. No. I love these. Honestly, I have the benefit of like being the moderator, but also I decide what the topics are. And I just I just
Well,
get to learn
yeah. I
so
mean,
many things.
selfishly, you're like, you know what? I kind of want to hear about this. And it's an interesting topic to you and, hopefully to other people. And is it the most exciting, discussion about operations of a family office? No, but it's
I
necessary.
think I think it's necessary, and I think I just am endeavoring to be like a little less ignorant every day. So a lot
Right.
of this, yeah, I think it's helpful to know, and I actually don't mind because I'm an operator. Like I was
Sure.
COO, and I just like have lived in the operation seat in a number of different organizations, and so I actually genuinely really like this stuff.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
brings me joy. So yeah, that's
Yeah, and
totally
things are
fine.
changing so quickly now, with the use of AI. I mean, that comes into play a lot, and how we're dealing with that and making sure it's safe first and foremost.
Mm,
Um, but it is just it's just amazing, how much AI can help with some of these mundane things that aren't on top of your list to do. It really can make them easier, and you really do need it. And I think a lot of it is just, I mean, from what I see, is risk of there having been one or two people in the office and nobody else really, you
mm,
know, nobody else knows what they're doing. And so they've got to end up cross training and having other people in the office and writing processes and procedures because it's just too risky to have that knowledge within a couple people, and it happens
Yeah.
all the time, and it happens in regular corporations too.
Yeah. Actually, I don't have any questions in the Q&A, but I do have one more question before we go
Sure.
then. In that case, when you talk about AI and security, how do you guys have a standard list of like recommendations for family offices to ask about? And I think this stands for not only family offices, but like anyone using any financial or sensitive type data software, like in any realm. But do you guys have a standard question set or standard like checklist of things that you need to be worried about as a family office sharing your financial data with a vendor?
Yes, we do. And when we're going through a software search, there's some standard things that the vendor has to provide, as far as privacy and audits and things like that. Those are pretty standard. But then there are other things that, I mean, these issues have come up in the last year with AI that you need to be thinking about, you need to be asking, and you got to think about your risk tolerance. Um, I had I like to give real stories. I think it's helpful. I had a client, I don't know, it was a few months ago. They had decided on, they had picked a software. They had decided on it. And, when we dug a little deeper, basically what happened, they're using client data to help, they're aggregating client data to help everybody on that system, right?
Mm,
So they're using
like,
everybody's client data, they're aggregating it, it's helpful for the system, it's helpful for people on the system, but this particular client was like, we don't want our data in there. Like we can't have that. There was no way to turn it off.
mm,
And so just things like that, that is your data, what's your data being used for? I mean, we try to we use Teams, and so it's insulated, and so Teams is Teams, and it's not learning outside of Teams. So we use that as a precaution. But yes, we do have a list, because every day I feel like there's something new that people need to be
yeah.
aware of and ask about. And if the vendor, and the vendor might the vendor might not have thought of it before.
Mm,
And so it's something that everybody, if they want to be a partner, then everybody's going to have to talk about it and consider it, because these are real things. And, it's, there's not a script. There's not a script. And so things come up every day, and asking those things to protect ourselves the best we can. Yes, we do that during the search process. So,
yeah, that's good to know. And I think that the internal benchmarking is one that comes up, like from a Serif perspective, that comes up quite a bit because private market data is very difficult to find.
yeah.
And then you have some people who like actually they've asked, like they've requested from us as a software provider, can you
Hmm.
guys, aggregate this data, anonymize it, and then give us benchmarks for like, and primarily it's early stage investments, like startup investments. And from our standpoint, I'm like, yeah, I see why that would be useful.
Yeah,
However,
right.
I just,
Right. And
yeah,
it was the same thing. They were anonymizing the data. So nobody knew, but they just still didn't want to participate in
yeah,
that,
which I totally
And
get.
so, hey, that's so, we obviously went down a different path, because that couldn't be, it couldn't be rectified. And maybe someday it will, and you'll be able to opt out of
Yeah.
that. Um, but yeah, it can be really helpful to have other people's data, but just, are you comfortable with the possible risk in that?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna close us out here. Thank you
Okay.
everyone for joining, and thank you, Erin, for joining us here.